Okay.
But on this, I mean, you asked Andy about it, but let's pick your brain on it. How realistic is it? Is Greg Sankey in his office in Birmingham smiling today, knowing that he and the Big Ten to a lesser degree, but the Big Ten is closer to the SEC than the Pac-12 is to the Big Ten, in my opinion. So you've got tiers, and the SEC is way up here, and you've got the Big Ten a step below, and I think there's a gap before you get to the next Power 5 league.
Yeah.
So
yeah, in terms of on-the-field accomplishments, I would agree that the SEC is ahead of the Big Ten, and in terms of money, the numbers are so big that it doesn't really matter which one is ahead, but the Big Ten is ahead, and the Big Ten is going to take another step forward in the next year. Pretty significant step forward. And then that gap will close, but it won't close completely when the new SEC TV deal goes into place.
Yeah. The SEC benefits from having more schools and programs that care a lot. And the Big Ten has Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Michigan State, Wisconsin, Iowa, and then Nebraska. I guess they care a lot, but they don't produce. And then there's a fall off with Illinois and Indiana and Northwestern and Maryland and Rutgers. The SEC doesn't have that many where you kind of, Maryland, Rutgers, I guess. Everybody cares except for Vanderbilt and Missouri, I guess. Point being, what is the league office thinking right now? Like, do they think that they can break off and it be successful? Is that something they actually want to do? Would they do it? How would it be received? And if you're the Big Ten, are you on the phone with Greg Sankey right now? Hey, dude, if you're going to leave, I'm coming with you. So just give us a heads up, and I'm coming too. If you want to make your own playoff, I want Ohio State to play Alabama in the playoff. I don't want them playing Oregon State, okay? So call me before you do anything.
Hey, Dad, you want to take a stab at this first, or you want me to start?
You go right ahead. I want to hear your thoughts first.
I'm intrigued, and I feel like this is relatively new information, that Jim Delaney is so incredibly involved behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. Jim Delaney is the former Big Ten commissioner who is still advising Kevin Warren, who is advising Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, in kind of a consultant role, and is advising the Rose Bowl, which kind of de facto means is also advising the Pac-12. So you got one guy with a whole lot of power behind the scenes. And I think he maybe is pulling more of the puppet strings even than when he was sitting in the commissioner's chair in the Big Ten. That's just kind of an aside. Your question about whether the SEC is willing or wants to, I think those are two different questions. I think the SEC ultimately is willing to do what is best for its member institutions. The 14 current teams, and starting in July of 2025, the 16 teams, with the addition of Texas and Oklahoma. Ultimately, Greg Sankey's charge is not to be the steward of college football. It's to be the steward of the SEC. And so if at the league level, with the support of the presidents and the athletics directors, in conjunction with those people, if Greg Sankey and the leadership of the SEC believes that it is in the best interest of the conference to go it alone, then yeah, I think they would be willing to take that dramatic step. But your question about whether or not at the league office level they believe that this is what is best? No, I don't think so. I think Greg Sankey and Charlie Hussey and Mark Womack, who've been at it for a long time, know that a healthy college football is when the entire country is involved. And I think that may be the most frustrating part of this, because Greg Sankey, with those three other people on the working group, Bob Bowlesby, Craig Thompson, and Jack Swarbrick, they set aside the what's best for us and took a what's best for college football approach. And people can say that was ill-intended because of what was going on behind the scenes with Oklahoma and Texas. But even with what was going on behind the scenes with Oklahoma and Texas, I think the solution that they put out there was what was best for college football writ large. They put out a proposal, a solution that gives the opportunity for the Pac-12 to be part of the playoff every year. Not happening currently. For the ACC to be part of the playoff every year. Not happening currently. Paves the road for a group of 5 champion to be part of the playoff every year. Obviously not happening currently. Does that mean that the SEC ends up with 3 or 4 or, goodness, 5 teams out of the 12? Possibly. But is having a participant in the tournament that you have not been invited to almost every year that the current model has been in place, is that not better than not having one? And I'm not even sure that I really understand the argument from the Pac-12 and the ACC. Like, I can read what Jim Phillips says. I can read what George Kliavkoff says. I can read what Kevin Warren says. It's a lot of hollow statements, though. I mean, the ACC thinking, well, there's a lot that we don't know about the future of the college athletics landscape. This isn't the right time. Oh, horse crap. You're saying that because you're trying to force Notre Dame's hand. Andy Staples laid out for us a little while ago why Notre Dame's hand won't be forced. So it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. That's where I start.
At the end of the day, Borky just said it a minute ago, it is all about money. And the commissioners of college football know that there are billions to be made, not millions, billions to be made on a 12-team playoff, especially if you start talking about getting home games in there, TV rights, all that stuff. I feel like this round of negotiating was a ton of posturing. There was a lot of hurt feelings, but and they've squandered it for the time being. But when they come back to the table again, there's going to be a lot of, okay, we're going to do this now. And we just have to hope that what Andy Staples just told us doesn't come to pass. And the SEC says, you know what, never mind. Because then we're talking about a whole new era of college football that, I mean, I'll still watch the games, but I don't know that it would be the same.
Now, there was one thing in Andy Staples' story. He said this doesn't eliminate the SEC from playing games against other teams. Yeah, you probably go to a 9-game schedule in league play. You get rid of divisions or quads or whatever, and you rank the teams 1 through 16 in the SEC. Do you know how cool a regular season it would be where what you knew going into the year was you had to be in the top 8 to advance to the postseason tournament? Or 6, whichever number we go with. Say what? Yeah.
Say who?
No, I'm with you. We got a break coming up. We'll continue the conversation. But wouldn't it be cool for Ole Miss and Mississippi State to know that, look, we don't have to win the West or win the East if you're Missouri or South Carolina to get to Atlanta to have a chance to be a part of the playoff. We just got to finish in the top half of the league. And then we got a puncher's chance, and we'll athletic, the SEC versus all y'all. And the elements in this story is, the SEC, if it wanted to, could step away from the current college football playoff format and could format a playoff for its league, whether it was 6 teams or 8 teams. Maybe 2 teams get a bye and you play a couple of quarterfinal games on campus, and you play semifinal games on campus, and then your 2 teams left standing play maybe on New Year's Day. And if the rest of the college football world wants to still have its playoff, whether it's with 4 teams or whatever, then they can do that. And then maybe you're able to take the SEC champion and the champion of everybody else and pit them off in a national championship game like we do currently. And that would be your national champion. That's kind of the premise of the article. And the idea is that, the SEC could do this and be fine. The Big Ten could do it and could be fine. If you heard our conversation with Andy a little while ago, he said those are the only 2 conferences that can do this. Pac-12 can't do it, ACC can't do it, and obviously the Big 12 can't do it, especially 2 years from now, once Texas and Oklahoma are gone. So, do you like the idea of having 9 league games? And let's just use the idea that 8 of the 16 teams make some sort of a playoff where 1 plays 8, 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, and 4 plays 5 in your first round games. And then the winners meet on the higher seeds campus. And then you play a conference championship game that are the last 2 standing. Do you like that idea?
It's fascinating, and this concept is interesting to me. I would prefer it not have to get to this point. Because while, when people say playoff expansion will ruin the regular season, I don't really buy that. Because NFL fans are locked in for 17 weeks, and almost half the league makes the playoffs, and everybody loves the playoffs too. Have you seen the ratings? So it works out for them. But I feel like blowing up college, it's not blowing it up, but altering the regular season like this isn't necessary. Because I do like the regular season as it currently exists. I like that, especially the teams we cover, can control who they play for 4 of their 12 games. And all they need to do is go 2-6 in the league and they can go to a bowl game. I think that's important here. And this maybe would hurt that.
Okay. By the way, for those of you that are asking, is there Ole Miss baseball today? No, they postponed the game. That was announced, about 10 o'clock or so this morning. They are going to play Arkansas State, or they're going to attempt to play Arkansas State tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If they'd moved the game up, they would have been able to play it. But in the next hour or so, it looks like it's going to start raining in Oxford. They would not, if they had started at 4 o'clock, have gotten the entire game in. There was no chance they were going to get the whole game in, and so they pushed it back a day. So if you're looking for Ole Miss baseball on the radio right now and you don't hear it, that's why. So does it feel like, let's make this super local. Does it feel like for Mississippi State and Ole Miss, you got a better shot finishing in the top half of the league once there's 16 teams and getting into an 8-team SEC-only tournament? Or do you prefer the path of we get to the 12-team playoff, the conference champion is going to be part of the playoff, and then there's 6 at-large spots out there that on most years, of those 6, 2, maybe 3 will be filled by an SEC team. The likelihood of being part of a postseason tournament is higher if you just finished in the top half of your league. But there would be something really, really special. And it's not far-fetched to think Mississippi State or Ole Miss could find themselves and would find themselves occasionally as part of a 12-team playoff, competing with the entire country for those 6 at-large spots and ultimately a national championship. I think I prefer the 12. The 12-team playoff idea.
I definitely prefer the 12.
And as we have discussed, if we go back to the college football playoff era, Mississippi State, hey, Dad, correct me if I'm wrong here, would have qualified for the college football playoff one time.
Yes.
And Ole Miss would have qualified at least 2, but probably 3 times.
You can safely say 2.
Yeah. And this past season is one of them.
Yeah.
So it's not a far-fetched idea to think. Now, would Ole Miss or Mississippi State participate in the college football playoff with the same regularity as Alabama or Georgia or LSU, assuming they pull it back together? Or maybe even Texas A&M, who hasn't quite been able to get over the hump? Probably not. But once a decade, maybe twice a decade? It'd be really, really cool. In the scenario of this past season, not only would Ole Miss have participated, Ole Miss would have hosted a first-round playoff game.
Hello, economic boom.
Yeah.
Local businesses would appreciate that, I think.
It's just going to be too much pressure from the schools on the commissioners to turn this down when the time comes. It just is. I'm surprised it wasn't enough now, to be honest.
Yeah, it is crazy that Wake Forest can sit back and have the season that they did and not be screaming from the mountaintops, vote for expansion. We would have played in the playoff. Pittsburgh. Wake Forest possibly could have been left out. But whoever won the ACC championship between Wake Forest and Pittsburgh would have played in the playoff.
And it would have made us care about the outcome of the ACC championship game.
Which, by the way, received a lower audience than the AAC championship game. Fewer people watched the ACC championship than the AAC championship.
We would have cared far more about Utah, Oregon on Friday night.
No doubt.
In the Pac-12 championship game, knowing that the winner of that game was going to the college football playoff.
And this goes back to something that the Pac-12 used to, well, I guess they're doing it, but the 9 a.m. local time starts. You know why they're doing that? Because of this region of the country. If there is a football game that has stakes on it, the Southeast watches, including the NFL. I know people love to get on our text line and say nobody cares about the NFL. The numbers say otherwise. I mean, we don't get public numbers for Jackson. Nobody reports them. But when there's a Sunday night football, Birmingham and New Orleans are always in the top 10 highest rated markets for every meaningful major football game. All of them. Doesn't matter where it is or who's playing. If it's big time game, the Southeast watches it. They need us. They do.
Here's one on the C Spire text line. I live college football. Part of that is seeing the SEC play, but part of that is seeing how the SEC stacks up against the rest of the country. I love seeing the pundits squirm and make excuses and bash the SEC and all that. It's weird. There's a sense of pride in SEC football being at the top, even if that usually means Bama. I think getting out of that loses something in the sport. I agree.
I agree with that, yes.
Kyle says Florida State and Miami have to get back to their glory days.
Boy,
that certainly would help the ACC.
If you're Clemson and Florida State, are you trying to get out? And would the next layer, would the SEC accept a team? Well, they did, Texas. So that doesn't matter anymore. Getting new states for TV markets doesn't matter. Would you add Clemson? Would you add Florida State?
You know, we got an interesting comment a second ago that said, what would this do to the other sports, to baseball, to basketball? I don't think it would do anything. I think the other sports would continue because their postseason works. It's college football that's got a postseason issue. And so if 16 SEC teams stepped out, who would the candidates be that would really like to join? But maybe more importantly, could they join because of their current contractual obligations? So what else have we got on this playoff thing? I mean, I know there's some hypothetical in here. I mean, somebody sent us a message, said you guys have already started on the medical herb. I'm not sure what we've said, though, that is so incredibly outlandish.
I mean, Andy did not just make this up, and everything you said was not made up either. He didn't just pull this story out of, hey, wouldn't this be fun? No.
It came from Greg Sankey's comments about don't necessarily believe that we're going to re-engage on a 12-team playoff when we come back to the table. And it's interesting, Borky, because I don't think anybody picked up on that the first time Greg Sankey said it.
No, not really.
We talked about it on this show. When Greg Sankey walked out of those meetings and he gave the quotes to Ross Dellinger and a couple of other people and included, don't necessarily just assume we're coming back to the table and are willing to do the exact same thing. And nobody really picked up on it a month ago. But a week ago, it feels like everybody picked up on it. And Andy Staples said, at the surface level, he didn't think much of it. And then when he thought more about it, he said, why would he say that? Because what have we said 100 times about Greg Sankey? He doesn't accidentally say stuff. He's calculated. He thinks about it in advance. He weighs what he's going to say and how he's going to say it. And honestly, less filtered Greg Sankey, which I feel like we've gotten more of lately, is a whole lot more interesting and provocative than word salad soundbite Greg Sankey.
Maybe he's finally getting comfortable.
Hope that's not it.
I mean, there's got to be something to that, though, right?
I mean, in your first meeting at your new job, did you talk a whole lot? You kind of ease your way into things. You gauge.
Especially when you were filling the shoes of the man whose shoes he was filling. Mike Slive, who had been a gangster and had taken the SEC to incredible heights, taking the work of Roy Kramer and advancing it to levels almost beyond belief. And now Greg Sankey's building on that legacy that Mike Slive left behind. And yeah, maybe it takes a little time to completely get your footing. There are a couple of things that have happened in Greg Sankey's tenure that he has admitted he would like a do-over on. The way the Florida LSU Hurricane football debacle was handled. He's publicly said, I messed that up. Would like a redo on that one. Can't help but wonder if maybe he wishes that some schools in the SEC had handled NCAA investigations differently with the counsel of the league office. But the last few years have been hitting stride and sprinting ahead.
Is it fair to say, ideally, this ends by major college football breaking away from the NCAA and keeping the other sports in it? Because we've already got kind of precedent for that. The college football playoff is not the NCAA.
Right.
So there's already a separate body that has decision-making power over the sport anyway. Already happens. The NCAA does not put on the FBS championship. They do FCS, Division II, and Division III, and every other sport. So it's already kind of here. So just break football away. That gives you a chance to get NIL figured out with competent people instead of the NCAA. It gives you a chance to get the transfer portal figured out with competent people instead of the NCAA. And you can let the NCAA do the one thing they do well. Tournaments. And honestly, who really cares about how the tennis programs are governed? The tennis players do, I'm sure. The NCAA probably screws up in a lot of places. But tennis only exists because of football. So let's make sure that you're getting football right. And if the NCAA can govern tennis, that's fine.
In your scenario, Would you see all of Division I football split off and create its own thing for football and everything else stay under the NCAA umbrella? Or would you see 70-ish teams break off and the remaining teams play under an NCAA umbrella?
I mean, ideally, everybody would, right? Because there's only 70 or so college football programs, probably less, that are, capable of actually making a championship, financially super viable, those kind of things. But take Southern Miss, for example. Southern Miss has a very small athletic budget. That's just reality. According to Google, it's smaller than Furman's. So if you're Southern Miss, wouldn't you want to align with people who would get the portal right? Because that affects you. Transfer portal affects Southern Miss. NIL affects Southern Miss. They've got players that are getting NIL deals. Not as many as Ole Miss and Mississippi State, but they've got them. So wouldn't you rather the people that kind of know what they're doing make those decisions as opposed to watching the NCAA stumble all over it again? So if you're Southern Miss, your budget is, a fifth of Ole Miss and State's, but at least you know that Greg Sankey and people that he would align himself with would make better decisions than Mark Emmert and the people he's aligned himself with?
Seems reasonable. Seems reasonable. And look, I mean, because there are some concessions being made that allow the group of five legitimate access to a spot in the playoff, maybe it is more appealing. Right? I mean, we've had this conversation about Southern Miss through the years. Hey, would it not be better for Southern Miss football to have a chance to go play for a national championship? And play on a level playing field with teams that are like it in other conferences. Whereas now, with Southern Miss making the move to the Sun Belt, and that being a pretty good football league, an exceptional season gives you a chance, right? I mean, the AAC has separated itself a little bit, and Cincinnati's kind of separated itself in the AAC, but we're not that far removed from Northern Illinois playing in an Orange Bowl, from Boise State getting into multiple Fiesta Bowls. Now, it takes an unbelievably special season, right? You got to run the table. And you probably got to beat somebody from a Power 5 conference to boost your strength of schedule a little bit. But if you're the highest ranked group of five champion in a given year, then, if you're one of the 6 highest ranked conference champions, then you get a berth. So, yeah, maybe that does make some sense for everybody to just take a step away. We'll let the NCAA govern basketball. We'll let it govern baseball and softball and women's basketball and golf and tennis and rowing and all the other sports that are out there. But football is different. Football is unique. Football is already kind of on its own, especially as it pertains to the postseason. So, yeah, let's just split football off. It's not entirely different from my argument about football as it pertains to Title IX. When you talk about scholarship equity and all of those things, pull football out of the conversation because it's different. It's a unicorn. It's unique. And then match scholarships, men and women, for every sport the rest of the way. That's how you get balance.